Zone X did not appear on any official map. It wasn't classified. It wasn't restricted. It simply wasn't there. And yet satellites avoided it. Survey flights altered course without instruction. GPS signals degraded as they approached a specific stretch of land, coordinates that refused to stabilize. Engineers blamed software. Cartographers blamed outdated data. But the locals had another explanation. That's where the world thins. No one could explain what that meant, only that people who crossed a certain boundary stopped calling home. Not immediately, not dramatically. They just drifted out of contact, as if reality had quietly closed the door behind them. No wreckage, no emergency signals, just absence. The strange thing about Zone X was that there was no visible edge, no offense, no warning sign, no sudden change in landscape. You could stand with one foot inside it and never know, until time began behaving differently. Watches lost seconds, then minutes, then meaning. Voices echoed too long. Footsteps sometimes arrived before the foot touched the ground. Those who turned back described the same sensation. It felt like the world was gently asking me to leave. But some didn't turn back. And those who crossed too far reported something worse than fear. Calm. A quiet certainty that nothing waited for them beyond that point. Not death, not life. Just ending. The first person to enter Zone X on record was not an explorer. He was a delivery driver. No training, no curiosity, no intention. His route cut through a stretch of empty land that shortened travel time by exactly 7 minutes. He had driven it dozens of times before. One afternoon, his dashcam captured something unusual. At 14:32, the sky flickered, not visibly, but digitally. The footage skipped 3 frames without explanation. At 14:33, the radio fell silent. Not static, not interference, silence. At 14:34, he spoke for the first time on the recording. Why does it feel like I've already been here? The truck stopped moving at 14:35. The engine never shut off. Rescue teams arrived 4 hours later. The vehicle was empty. No signs of struggle. No footprints leaving the cab. Only the driver's phone, placed neatly on the passenger seat, still recording. The last frame showed the road continuing forward. Perfectly normal. And somehow wrong. Zone X did not kill everyone who entered. That was what frightened researchers the most. A small number returned, physically intact, medically stable, legally alive. But none of them agreed on what they experienced. Some said they walked for hours. Others insisted it had been seconds. One survivor described standing still while the landscape moved around him. Another claimed the sky bent downward, not collapsing, but observing. Every testimony contradicted the last, except for one shared detail. I couldn't remember why I needed to leave. Doctors found no trauma, but scans showed subtle abnormalities, areas of the brain associated with orientation and memory lighting up without stimulus, as if their minds were still responding to something that wasn't there anymore, or wasn't here. Inside Zone X, descriptions begin to fail. Survivors try to explain what they saw, but every attempt collapsed into metaphor. Words like far, dark, and empty appeared repeatedly, but never consistently. One researcher noted something unsettling. People weren't forgetting words. The words were refusing to fit. A man described walking toward a hill that arrived before he reached it. Another said shadows fell in directions that hadn't been invented yet. Audio recordings taken inside Zone X captured voices, not foreign, not distorted, just unfinished. Sentences ended without endings, as if reality itself was losing grammar. Instruments failed before people did. Compass needles spun slowly, not wildly, as if searching for something that wasn't magnetic. Drones returned footage of landscapes that looped, hills repeating, trees appearing twice in the same frame. GPS units placed 5 feet apart reported distances of several miles. The machines weren't broken. They were confused, because Zone X did not exist within the world. The world existed around it. And once that idea entered the research logs, something changed. Access requests were denied. Funding was frozen. The phrase anomalous zone was replaced with geographic irregularity. Someone somewhere decided this place was better left unnamed. There was no official shutdown, no memo, no emergency declaration, no signature at the bottom of a page. Research into Zone X simply slowed. Emails stopped being answered. Requests were rerouted. Teams were reassigned to unrelated projects. When questioned, officials used the same phrasing. There is no ongoing investigation, which was technically true, because investigations require questions, and Zone X had begun to produce answers no one could use. One internal report was leaked briefly before disappearing from every server it touched. Its final sentence read, "Zone X is not expanding. It is not invading. It is waiting." The breakthrough didn't come from a physicist. It came from a linguist. She noticed something no one else had. Every survivor struggled with prepositions: inside, outside, beyond. Their language avoided them instinctively, because Zone X wasn't in the world. It wasn't outside it either. Zone X was a boundary condition, the place where reality stops being required to behave. Not a void, not an afterlife, a margin, a space where rules end because there is nothing left to enforce them. That's why people didn't die there. That's why machines malfunctioned. You don't break physics by entering Zone X. You leave physics behind. After the leaks, something unexpected happened. People began going to Zone X on purpose. Not thrill seekers, not explorers. People with unfinished lives, terminal patients, former prisoners. Those who felt the world had already ended for them. None of them announced their intentions. None of them asked permission. They simply walked toward the coordinates where maps went quiet. A few sent messages before crossing the boundary. Not farewells, clarifications. I just want it to stop asking things of me. I'm tired of choosing. And then they stepped forward. Zone X did not resist them. Those who went willingly were almost never seen again. But the few who did return described something terrifying in its gentleness. There was no pain, no fear, no judgment, just relief. A sensation of standing at the edge of everything and being allowed to stop. One man said, "It felt like the world finally stopped needing me." Doctors couldn't classify that. Psychologists couldn't treat it. Because how do you convince someone to stay in a world that demands effort when they've already visited a place that demands nothing? Zone X wasn't taking people. People were choosing it. The final experiment was designed to be simple. No people. No language. No interpretation. Just a signal. A continuous transmission sent towards Zone X. Light pulses, radio waves, mathematical constants. Things reality should always recognize. The signal entered. It did not return. Not weakened. Not altered. Unanswered. As if Zone X wasn't blocking it, but had no reason to respond. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared. Not a reply. A mirror. The exact transmission was detected on the opposite side of the planet, delayed by several minutes, stripped of direction, stripped of origin, as though the world itself had rerouted around something it could no longer include. The conclusion was unavoidable. Zone X wasn't an edge. It was a gap. And the world was learning how to live without that missing piece. Within a year, subtle changes appeared. New satellite data redrew coastlines slightly. Flight paths shifted without explanation. Distances recalculated themselves. Nothing dramatic. Just drift. Zone X did not grow. But the world began to adjust, like water flowing around a stone. Governments never announced it. Scientists never explained it. But cartographers noticed something that terrified them. Every new map placed Zone X farther from everything else. Not geographically, conceptually. As if reality was slowly editing it out. And once that process began, it became clear. The world was not ending all at once. It was ending there first. There was no announcement when it happened. No alarms. No alerts. No emergency broadcasts. Zone X didn't expand. It didn't consume land. It simply finished forming. Sensors placed near the boundary began returning the same reading, regardless of distance, direction, or orientation. Zero variance. Zero reference. The edge was no longer permeable. People who stood near it described a subtle sensation, like standing beside a door that had quietly locked itself from the inside. Those who tried to cross felt nothing dramatic. They just stopped, not frozen, not restrained, unable to continue, as if the idea of forward no longer applied. Zone X had become complete. Once something becomes complete, it no longer needs interaction. Life continued. That was the most disturbing part. Children were born. Cities expanded. Wars were fought and forgotten. Zone X faded from conversation, not through censorship, through irrelevance. People stopped traveling near it. Maps simplified their margins. Language adapted. Where the world ends became a phrase, not a location. Those who remembered what it truly was felt something like grief, not for the people who entered, but for the realization that the world could lose a piece of itself and still function. Meaning wasn't broken. It was reduced. Zone X was not a punishment. It was not a warning. It was not a test. That was the mistake everyone made, assuming it existed for us. In truth, Zone X was what remained when the universe stopped caring whether it was understood. A place where reality no longer bothered to perform. No observers required. No rules enforced. Not the end of the world. The end of relevance. And once relevance ends, nothing needs to happen. Those who entered Zone X were not lost. They were finished. Their lives didn't end violently or tragically. They ended completely. No longing. No future. No past pressing forward. Those who remained carried something heavier. Choice. To continue in a world that demanded effort, meaning, memory, knowing that somewhere not far away there was a place where none of that was required. Zone X didn't make the world smaller. It made staying harder. Zone X was not discovered by accident. It was revealed. Only once humanity reached a point where it could imagine stepping away from itself, from responsibility, from consequence, did the boundary become visible. The place had always been there. We simply weren't ready to notice it, until we were tired enough to look. The world doesn't end in fire. It doesn't end in darkness. It ends where continuation becomes optional. Zone X remains silent, complete, uninterested. A place with no demand for meaning. And that is why it is terrifying. Because the world does not need to be destroyed to end. It only needs a place where stopping is allowed.